Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with the Banh Mi sandwich. That's right, I don't do a lot of sandwich videos, mostly because they're sandwiches. But here I'm making an exception because this, my friends, is no ordinary sandwich. I mean, if sandwiches were rides at an amusement park, the Banh Mi would have the longest line. It's true. Sorry, liverwurst. I mean, this thing really is a masterpiece of contrasting taste, textures, and maybe most importantly, temperature. So let's go ahead and get started with the most important ingredient, the bread. In fact, in Vietnamese, banh mi actually means bread, or wheat bread, or I guess technically bread wheat. But anyway, to make a proper one, you're going to need one of these authentic French sandwich rolls, which should be super easy to find at your friendly local neighborhood French Vietnamese bakery. But just in case you don't have one of those near you, I will be showing you how to make these yourself in an upcoming video. So definitely stay tuned for that, because a great sandwich roll is really not that easy to find. And pretty soon you won't have to. So we are going to need some nice crusty rolls for this. And once we've taken care of that, we can move on to the almost as important secret sauce, which is generally some type of spicy mayonnaise spread. And while I can't tell you what other people put in their secret sauce, because of the whole secrecy thing, I will show you what I put in mine. Some real mayonnaise, a spoon of hoisin sauce, which is going to provide a very interesting brand of sweetness, and then last but not least, a generous splash of hot sauce. And not surprisingly, I'm going with sriracha. And we will take a spoon and mix that up, and that's it. Our subtly sweet and kind of spicy mayonnaise spread is done. So we'll go ahead and stir that together and simply reserve it until needed. And of course, if that's going to be a while, we'll keep that in the fridge. And once our secret sauce is done, we can move on to another very key ingredient, the pickled vegetables. So we'll start with the daikon. And if you've never seen a whole one, they grow embarrassingly large. So happily, my local market just let me buy a small piece off the top, which, believe it or not, was only like 20% of the whole thing. But anyway, regardless of the size, we'll go ahead and trim off the end, and then cut this in half so it's a little easier to julienne. And we should probably also go around with a knife trimming off the skin. And then what I'm going to do is cut this in half and julienne it using one of these Japanese vegetable slicers. And you can definitely do the same thing using a knife, but this really is a nice tool for saving time, as well as getting beautiful uniform pieces. Assuming, of course, you use the guard and don't slice your fingertips off. So do as I say, not as you see me doing. And by the way, daikon are actually pretty easy to find in supermarkets these days. But if you can't get them, you can just slice up some regular radish, and that would work okay here. So we'll go ahead and we'll julienne some daikon, and then do the exact same thing with some carrot. And personally, I prefer a 1-to-1 ratio, daikon to carrot. And with that, I will spare you any more vegetable slicing footage. And we will fast forward to a mixing bowl containing those equal parts carrots and radish, at which point it's time to pickle these, which traditionally takes a couple days. So we're going to use a shortcut method, which simply involves tossing these in some seasoned rice vinegar and letting them sit for about 15 minutes, or until the vegetables kind of relax and lose their rigidity. No, I said rigidity. See, when you first toss these with the vinegar, they're going to feel like raw, crisp, firm pieces of vegetable. But as you'll see, after about 15 minutes, they kind of soften up just a little bit, at which point those are ready to use, but not alone. For a proper banh mi, you're also going to need some thinly sliced jalapeno peppers. I also sliced up a little bit of English cucumber. And then finally, in addition to our now quickly pickled vegetables, we also want a ton of fresh cilantro leaves. And then once our veggies are prepped, we can move to final banh mi production. So what we'll do is we'll take one of our French rolls and split it in half, but not all the way through. We'll cut it almost all the way through and open it up. And then personally, I do recommend removing a little bit of that bread from the top. And that's for two reasons. One, so we have enough room for all those pickled vegetables we're going to pile on. But also, now this qualifies as a low-carb sandwich. So while optional, I do recommend that step. And then once our roll has been split and possibly partially excavated, we will spread that liberally with our secret sauce. And I really do mean liberally. You really want to go for full coverage here, which as you can see I did not achieve. I blame the combination of going too fast because I'm filming and trying to watch what I'm doing in the viewfinder. But enough of my lame excuses. The point is use a ton of that sauce and spread it over the entire surface. And then what we'll do is we'll transfer that to a foil-lined baking sheet and crisp that up in a nice hot oven. So we'll go ahead and bake that at 400 degrees for about 7 to 10 minutes, or until it's heated through and those edges start to brown, at which point it should look something like this. And do not skip this step. A banh mi must be served on a hot, preferably crispy crusted roll. And once we have that, we can start piling on our meat, which is hopefully going to be our pan-roasted 5-spice pork loin, which was presented in the last video. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. But having said that, there are lots of other options which we will review on the blog post. So the choice of meat will be your call. You are, after all, the banh mi of your banh mi. So we'll pile some of that on. And then after that, no matter which meat you use, we're going to insist you also add a few slices of pâté. In fact, if you're making this with other people and they don't want the pâté, you really need to insist. The extra flavor and richness it provides are key here. So I really do want you to fight for your right to pâté. And no, it doesn't have to be an imported truffle-studded goose liver pâté, although that does work nicely. But any old pâté will do. And then once our meat and hopefully pâté have been placed down, we'll finish this off with our veggies. So I'm going to first place down a little bit of cucumber, and then we'll top that with our quick pickled daikon and carrots. And we really do want to be generous with this stuff. In fact, I think I tried to make this a little too neat for the pictures. And in hindsight, if I was just making this to eat, I probably would put on about twice as much of the veggies. But anyway, we'll pile that up, being very generous with the amounts. And then we'll top that off with our sliced jalapeno, as well as copious amounts of our freshly picked cilantro leaves. And our sandwich is pretty much done. Now, normally at this point, this would be rolled and wrapped tightly in butcher paper, which holds everything together so you can slice it. But I didn't think that would look as good. So I just kind of used my knife and pressed it down and eventually got it cut without losing too much, revealing your classic banh mi cross-section. So pretty. So I transferred that to a plate and served it with some beet chips, which is a classic presentation nowhere. But really, who cares about the sides when we're talking about a sandwich like this? I mean, just an incredible combination of crisp, hot bread, that moist, succulent meat, and hopefully rich, buttery pâté. And when you contrast that with those cold, crisp vegetables and spicy secret sauce, you're talking about a sandwich that transcends sandwiches. Even if you don't make this with your own freshly roasted pork and fancy pâté, and simply just use some sliced deli meats, you're still going to be enjoying one of the greatest sandwiches you've ever had. Okay? So I really do hope you give this a try soon. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.